Paris, the volume Moyadim, the first volume, which is on Elul Tishrei, page Lamet Tes. Atem Nitzavim Mayoim Bashgocha Protis. It is today's Parsha. Atem Nitzavim Mayoim Kulchem Begoimer. You stand before me all together. Hine Parsha Zukoidin Lo'ilam Koidim Rosh Hashanah. We all know that this Parsha is always read before Rosh Hashanah. Why? Umerumez b'milas hayoim. In the word hayoim, that's in the verse, it alludes to the Koi al Rosh Hashanah. It refers to the holy day of Rosh Hashanah. Atem Nitzavim hayoim. Today, Rosh Hashanah, you're all standing before me. Ki zeh hayoim tchilas masecha. Because this day of Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of all action, of all activity, of all work. Zikarin l'yoim rishon. It's a commemoration l'yoim rishon to the first day. Which day? The day of Rosh Hashanah, which really is not the first day of the year, Yoini. The first day is the 25th of Elul. But man, Adam Rishon was created on Rosh Hashanah, on the sixth day of creation. Therefore, it's called in the Torah Yom Rishon, although it was not Yom Rishon, right? It was day number 6. Shekol Nitzutzei Nishamois, all sparks of all souls. Nitzavim u'misalim, they stand and they elevate v'mekoidem harishon, to the first source, to where they come from. B'yoyim zeh, on this day of Rosh Hashanah, ad lifnei Hashem. At the end of the verse it says, lifnei Hashem, before God, Rashechem, your heads, Shiftechem, the heads of the tribes, Mechoite v'tzecha, from the wood choppers, Ashoy v'mecha, to the fetchers of water. Everyone, there's a listing, by the way, if you count, of 10 different categories. In other words, every, mute yourself please, every single type of Jew, whether he's a wood chopper, whether he's a water fetcher, whether he's a rabbi, whether he's a social worker, whatever he is, regardless, not what he is, not only what he does, whatever he is as far as his work and his involvement, nevertheless, he stands before Hashem. There's no one that can say, I don't stand before Hashem at Rosh Hashanah. Whether you like it or not, today is Rosh Hashanah, and you stand before Hashem. Kulchem, all together, united. We'll talk about that a little later. Prat HaKosuf, the verse enumerates specifically Eser Madregos, 10 levels. Why 10? Just as there are 10 faculties within man's soul, right? Chabad, Chagas, Nehim, Chochma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gevura, Teferes, Netzach, Hoyd, Yesoid, Malchus, the 10 faculties. So therefore, the verse says, corresponding to those 10 faculties are what? Are the 10 different categories. The Hainu, Gimel Sichrim. The Alter Rebbe divides Hillel, the 10 faculties of the soul, into 2 categories. 3 intellectual ones, Chochma, Bina, Das, and 7 emotives, Zvezayin Midos, and 7 emotions. Kach, Hine, Kol Yisrael, so too all of Israel, Hein Koima Akashlema, we are all one people and one complete nation. The Klolos Nishmaseyan, and all of the Jewish people, Nikra, are called Knesses Yisrael, the congregation of Yisrael. Which have been divided as they come into the world into 10 levels. Next page Mem 40. Misalim Kol HaMadregos, all the different levels are elevated. Even to the lowest levels of which are represented by the wood choppers and the water carriers, which represent the lowest levels, they all come before Hashem, they're all elevated, because they reascend to their source. So what's the concept here? What's the concept? The concept is, Yaini, that even though throughout the year there are 10 different levels, 10 different activities, 10 different characters and all that, nevertheless, on Rosh Hashanah, they're all misalim. They all elevate themselves. They're taken for a ride into the Godhead. And over there, we find the commonality between each of the 10. And what's the commonality? That we come from one Father. Okay? You have 10 children, and one is a lawyer, one is a doctor, one is a learner, and one is this and one is that. Makes no difference. When they come before the Father, they're all the father and the mother's children. We don't look at them as they are in their individuality and specific tasks and responsibilities. We look at them as children of a father and a mother. And from that perspective, they're all the same. There's no difference. The Torah says, was Bishurin Melech Bisasiv Roshayam Yachad Shifti Yisro. When they all gathered, the heads, let's see how the Alter Rebbe teaches this. Pirush, Shekula Misasvim Yachad, all the Yidden join together, to be together like one. So in other words, Hillel, when do you have Bishurin Melech? When do you have the pride of the king, the best of the king, the righteousness of the king? When everyone is Bihisasef, when everyone gathers together. Kizek Klal Godel. Moshe, as you're driving, listen to this great rule. The chol, the osi, misitra de kedusha, who beprinetz notes tfilosim b'sefer. Whatever comes from the side of holiness, we have a rule. The edge is wedged in the beginning. She'ein lo b'chinas rosh v'sof. From this perspective, there is no head, there is no beginning, and there is no end. It's a circle. V'hu b'chinas agulim. This is what Kabbalah calls agulim, circles. Shenimshach mibchinas seivav kol almin. Where does the level of agulim, circles, take itself from? Begin. It's called the encompassing light. Sovev kol almin. V'lochei nomer azal. Therefore, the sages say, Havish shval ruach, next page, Memalef, b'fnei kol adam. Yonason, why should you be modest and humble before kol adam? What do you mean? I learn, I daven, I'm a mensch, and he seems to be not that way, so why should I have humility for him? Because every person has something that the other person doesn't have. Guess what? We need the sanitation workers, and they need us. We need the tannery workers. We need all types of people. All of us need each other. Therefore, it's a circle. There is an advantage and a virtue and advantage to each individual. In that detail, that individual is greater than the other, and the friend and the other needs him. So don't tell me you might not see the virtue of the sanitation worker. Yes, you do, because if not, you would have a lot of dirt in front of your house and it would smell. So obviously you do see the advantage of a sanitation worker, because we wouldn't want to do it. Someone has to do it. So I'm just using an example. I'm just saying. Or someone who has to, I was thinking of this morning, an idea came to me, I should make a certain type of website. And I say, great idea. A, who's going to fund it? B, who's going to run it? I don't want to run it. I'm busy as it is. I'm going to run a website. Everyone needs each other. You need each other to make it all a wholesome one. The Alter Rebbe gives the following mashal. Take a person who's made, in his erect posture consists of a head and feet. Although the feet are all the way to the bottom, and the head is above, on top, nevertheless, from one level, from one perspective, there is an advantage and a benefit to the feet over the head. That you need to walk with them. And therefore, without the feet, the head wouldn't be able to get to where it needs to. The feet have another advantage, that the entire body stands on the feet. If there's a problem with the feet, the head can work, the body can work, but the feet are it's hard for the person, difficult. The Alter Rebbe has another point to prove his point. When you have a headache, makizan dam beraglayim, there's a method of healing, and maybe Hillel knows more, someone knows more, where you do makizan, what's called hakazas dam, bloodletting. You do bloodletting of the feet, venirpa, and it brings healing to the head. I don't know if you could use this as an example. I'm not a doctor, and the doctor's in the OR room right now. He sent me a message. He's not at the shir. We would ask him. But the idea of taking for not stents, heart transplants, and they take veins from the feet or the legs. So maybe we could use that as a modern day example. I don't know. Anyway, the Alter Rebbe says that the headache that you have in your head, when you let blood from the feet, it heals the headache. So what do we see, Moshe? We see that the head is mekabel, it receives from the feet. V'nimtza she'ein shleimus laharosh biltei raglayim. There is no shleimut, there's no completion to the head without the feet. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I don't know if he says this soon, but Moshe Rabbeinu says, I'm standing here, and what does it say further in the pasuk? Sheish me'as elef raglei am, amongst the 600,000 foot soldiers. Those boots are made for walking all over you. Those boots that are looked by Sinatra as one way of shtus, we take that and we say that's what the Alter Rebbe means here. That without those boots, the head won't go anywhere. You must have the boots. Kach, next paragraph. Hinem kol Yisrael koime acha shleima. All Jews are one nation, one complete nation. V'nimtza afilu misha mechashev b'daitoi shubchinas roish. The Alter Rebbe says, even if you're such an individual, basically he doesn't say this, even if you're so arrogant to think that you are a rosh, I'm so rosh, I'm so great, in comparison to my friend, you don't have completion and wholesomeness without your friend. So therefore, if you understand this, you'll find a deficiency in your nefesh and your soul that your friend completes. We find that since we don't have a certain strength in a certain area, and then we look to someone who seems to be a regel type, a foot type of person, and guess what? He has it. He can schwitz, he can work, and I want to sit in the air conditioner and just relax or think or write. There are people that need to build the roads. There are people that have to make the utilities. You know? So when even though I'm into rosh type of things, I recognize I have a deficiency in a certain area, and therefore the other person completes me. When a Jew realizes that, the Jew will be subservient and modest towards his friend, to the point that you won't find any longer this idea, Yonason, of I am a Rosh and there are Raglayim. I just for a moment want to point out that Alter Rebbe is talking here about an experience that's much higher and deeper than there is a head and there's a foot and we complement each other. That's what he said earlier. But what he's getting at now is a higher level of what we call achdus, unity, where to begin with there is no head and there is no foot. The attitude, you hear this, Chevra? The attitude that a person comes to is not that there is categories, and categories all come together, but there to begin with isn't categories. Like the Rebbe told me, and I've told you this before, when I printed those 5,000 brochures, when I came to Marin County to introduce Chabad to the entire community, which mostly were either unaffiliated or Jews that belonged to Reform and Conservative temples and synagogues. So I saw this brochure that came out of Chicago, actually, from another Chabad rabbi friend, and it had his picture, and it said in big words, I am not Orthodox, I am not conservative, I am not Reform, I am a Jew, and a Jew, and this is at the heart of the Chabad philosophy. And I thought this is the best thing since the sliced bread, and I'm sending it out. I printed up 5,000 of those cards. But before I did that, I just sent my boss, the Lubavitch Rebbe, what I did. I sent him a sample. Within hours, I got an answer from the Rebbe. Within hours. A long answer. And basically the answer was, don't do that. Because by saying I am not, you are giving credence to the fact that there are categories in Judaism. There's Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox, and you're saying you're not. The Rebbe says, to begin with, there aren't any categories. Yes, one person might pray at this synagogue that's called Reform, and another person at this synagogue which is called Orthodox, etc. But that's not who the Jew is. So your message that you're trying to convey, this is what the Rebbe was telling me, is contrary. You're telling me this is Lubavitch? No! That's not Lubavitch. That's not Chabad. Chabad is, there are no categories. And the fact that someone has a profession or has an activity that we call Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox, that's not the real Jew. The real Jew is God, Hashem Echad. Now the Alter Rebbe is saying this over here too. The Alter Rebbe says, look at those words here, Beli Yimsa Ha'adam Rosh V'Sof. You come to a position of Avas Yisrael that you refine yourself so much that there's no difference between a head and a foot. And by the way, this is not easy. This is not easy. This is part of Rosh Hashanah. This is very hard. How many people do you know you could say they don't look at society and they don't look at people as individuals as far as differences. They see them as a wholesome one. But that's what Alter Rebbe is saying that we have to get to, and that can be accomplished on Rosh Hashanah, because on Rosh Hashanah, Atem, Nitzavim, Kulchem. In other words, look at the verse. You stand today, Kulchem. Then the Torah says, Yoini, Mereshechem, Shiftechem, Baba. The 10 categories follow the word Kulchem. Meaning, and so in other words, let's just go over again. There is the perspective that there are 10 categories, and that's a healthy beginning to unite the 10 categories. Then there's a higher experience, a deeper experience, where to begin with there aren't 10 categories. It's all kulchem. So within the individual categories, what's felt and heard is the kulchem. The kulchem shebehem. Yoinison, you're following this word? You've learned to see this. You understand this word. This is a deeper level in what we call Achdus Hashem and Achdus Bnei Yisrael. Right? Moshe, are you with me on this? We've got to make sure everyone understands this. Moshe?
Yeah, thank you.
So, the Alter Rebbe is saying that today, Vayidei Bittul Zeh Yisachdu, and through this humility, Yisachdu, we unite Lahashras Yichudi Yisbarach, for Hashem to dwell on us. Page Membeis, next page. Shemisitri de Kedusha, coming from a place of holiness, Belidash V'Sof, without head and end. Mashenkein, conversely, Misha Mechashev B'Daite Nifrit B'Mailosei L'Gabe Chaveiroi, someone who thinks, I'm better than him. And by doing so, he divides the head and the end. That individual falls into the world of separation from the other negative side, and pirut, divisiveness, rules this person. Now, you understand, we're talking about a mindset, Yaini. We look, in other words, when we learn Chassidus, just for a moment, because I want to learn the text, but when we learn Chassidus, we're not just learning the practical, we're learning the philosophical and psychological as it impacts the practical, and we always look back at the philosophical and psychological. So the Alter Rebbe is saying here, if you think about an other, that you are a Rosh and he is a Sof, then you have fallen into a world of separation and divisiveness. And that's what rules you until you do tshuva. So you want to know why you have strife in your life? Because you're full of strife. That's why you have strife. If you wouldn't think this way and you wouldn't be this way, the way you've made yourself to be, because your essence is good and holy, but you've backed yourself into a place of, I am the Rosh, and he or she is Sof, then you have fallen into the world Alma de Pruda. And that's very unhealthy, Alma de Pruda, because Alma de Pruda, we see everything with separateness. Everything is separate. And that's very unhealthy. And it causes a lot of problems in the personality, in the character, and it's a big mess. So the Hine Bereish Hashanah says the Alter Rebbe, but I recognize that we're only humans and we fall into this trap. Says the Alter Rebbe, Hashem understands, and that's why we have Reish Hashanah. That's why Reish Hashanah is the experience of tshuva. What happens Moshe Rosh Hashanah? All Jewish souls collectively return to their source, which is unity. Quoting the earlier verse, when the heads of the nation gather, Rosh U'Pchinas Machshava. Rosh is the level of thought. The Rosh Yam and the heads of the nation, Hein Pchinas HaMachshava Sheklos Yisrael. These are the thoughts of the general nation of Israel. Sheim Esasvim Alma de Pruda. They are gathered from the world of separation, and they're reunited to the world of Achdus. You hear that taich? What a taich! Rosh Am B'Hisasef. Again, the verse says B'Hisasef Rosh Am. Literally, Yonason, when the heads of the nations gather for a big meeting. Says the Alter Rebbe, we're talking not about the heads of we're talking about those people and those individuals that look at themselves and have a feeling of separation, and they've now been scattered into the world of separation, which falls all over, chaos reigns. One day we're here, one day we're there, we don't know where we are. Comes in Reish Hashanah b'Hisasef. We're all gathered together, all those sparks and all those separate entities and feelings are gathered to the real truth, which is Achdus. During the year, their thoughts cause them to turn this way and to turn that way. Why do we turn to green other pastures and benefit from them, although it's very unhealthy? It's because we've been trapped in Alma de Pruda. Comes Rosh Hashanah, they all become Yachad. Yochid. They all come back to the private domain together. And this is derech klal, the general rule. In other words, this is the general rule of what takes place on Rosh Hashanah. So if someone asks you, what does the tshuva of Rosh Hashanah consist of that's different Hillel than the tshuva of every day? The everyday tshuva is on the individual and regarding individual details of life. Rosh Hashanah, the tshuva is to bring all of Yisrael and all of my being to a place of Achdus. In other words, listen to this. The Al-Chet, we don't say on Rosh Hashanah. Why not? Because that's antithetical to Rosh Hashanah. Al Chait is already focusing on a detail. I sinned this way, I sinned that way. That you got Yom Kippur for. Rosh Hashanah is what we call the tshuva klalit. It's the general concept of tshuva. Do I want to be in unison? Do I want to be in unity? Or do I want to continue being in separation? And that's a very powerful thing to think about. And also, and this is why it's specifically to Rosh Hashanah, not to Yom Kippur, because it's the Rosh, it's the head of the year. The nerve center, Yaini, begins Rosh Hashanah. Yom Kippur is not the nerve center. And we all know that everything depends on the brain. The brain. Rosh Hashanah is the focus on the brain. Or like I use the word, and I think it's a very good way, it's the paradigm shift. Yom Kippur is not the paradigm shift. Yom Kippur is banging this way and that way. I did this, I did that, forgive me, Mechila. And I'm not belittling it, you know. It's Yom Kippur. It's Yom HaKadosh. It's very high. Or as Reb Shlomo said, it's holy, holy, holy. It is holy, holy, holy. But before you can appreciate holy, 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 you have to know what holiness is. Rosh Hashanah is setting the stage. Holiness is Achdus. And anything, anyone that's committed to Achdus is holy. That's the rule. That's the rule. It doesn't mean individually you can't practice this way or that way. Absolutely. You know? But in concept, all Yidden are one. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's what Hashem wants. We say it every day in davening, in Sim Shalom. Bless us when there's Kulanu Ka'echad. When we're all one, if there's something lacking in Kulanu Ka'echad, sorry, the bracha is not there. So the answer for us, for Klal Yisrael, is Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is that day, and that's why we put such an emphasis on the importance of Rosh Hashanah, because we're looking for the tshuva that's known as the paradigm shift tshuva. We're not going into, the details. Of course, and therefore, like I told you last week, or I told another shia, I don't remember who I told, but we have the Zechreinos, the Malchus, and the Shofros, right? Memory, kingship, and Shofros. Those are all ways of expressing the unity, the Achdus, the Hamelech. Okay? So the whole focus, we have to really change our way of thinking about Rosh Hashanah. And if it was good enough for Rabbi Soloveitchik, who was a Litvak, or like he would say, I'm a Mesnagid from Brisk, from Beis Harav, if he could speak about Rosh Hashanah as the coronation of the king, I've told you this, the coronatsia, right? I mean, and he wasn't a Lubavitcher, and he wasn't a Chassid, although he liked Chassidim and he liked Chabad, of course. That means he came to a place that he understood that what the Alter Rebbe is saying, and he was mamish. You could say he was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe by him was Kaddish, Kaddish, Kaddish. Why? As a brisker, it wasn't because, he was emotionally moved. It was because he understood with his deep mind that this is the theme of Rosh Hashanah. Hamelech. The Tshuva Klolis. So this is a very important mimer. Yes, Hillel.
I just want to share a couple of thoughts that came up as we were doing this beautiful piece.
Yes.
One, when the first thing that jumped out at me when we said the second paragraph, when we said Vayidib Yeshurun Melech. So Yeshurun is Lashon Yashar, straight.
Correct.
And then he begins very shortly thereafter and talks about Na'utz Sofan B'tchilas, and he talks about a circle. So I was reminded, of the process of creation that the Sefer Yetzirah describes, that everything begins with a point, and then there become 2 points, and then there become 3 points, and then the connections come to form the third dimension of time and space, or whatever it's talking about over there, the circular dimension.
Right,
I was remembering that in this week's Parsha as well, right after Atem Nitzavim Kulchem Hayom, it begins to talk about Rosh Poreya, that the person who's going to secretly do avodah zarah, a secret. So, like they take for themselves a rosh, and they sort of separate out. They see themselves as separate from everything else. And it occurred to me that we could say, what is a rosh pareya? It's a rosh that forgets that it's connected to its feet.
Uh-huh.
That it's right. Like the famous story of the Baal Shem Tov. I think it's Rosh Hashanah, right, where he's davening a long time, and the Hasidim leave, and he finishes because he can't stand on their shoulders,
right,
to reach the high levels. He needed all of them there.
Yeah. It could even be that the concept of Noach Chilosim B'Seifim, the beginning is wedged in the end, the edge is wedged in the beginning. It could be that it's from Sefer Yetzirah. Let's see if he gives here a footnote here. Yes, it is Sefer Yetzirah, Perek Aleph. Yeah, so it is Sefer Yetzirah. Okay, let's continue.
Whoa.
Let's continue. Any other questions, or we'll continue? Page Mem Dalid, Perek Sheni. Yes, Moshe.
No, Rabbi Dov, can you just go back for a second? The concepts of Malchus, Zichronos, and Shofros.
Yes.
Zichronos. How do we understand Zichronos? How would you just...
The simple answer that a Jew in the Beis Medrash would answer you is that since this is a Yom Hadin and you want the judge to look favorably at you, you do what it says in the Megillah, for example, where Balaylahu Noded Ashnas HaMelech, the king couldn't sleep, and he said, "Bring me my book Sefer HaZichronos." Look into the Megillah. I think that's even the language there. And he sees that this Jew helped him. Oh, he says, this Jew helped me. Well, then I owe him a favor. And therefore, he goes on to annul the decree. So Moshe, it's Rosh Hashanah, and there's a court case. So we bring to Hashem's attention things that we did that were forgotten, metaphorically speaking, by God, and we remind God of things that we, the Jewish people, did that God said, I like that, I'm happy, and that's brought now in our favor for the Yom Hadin. That's classical Judaism 101. Clear? Moshe, is that clear?
Yeah,
okay.
That's clear.
That's clear. But Chassidus sees it in a whole different way. Because Chassidus asked the question, what do you mean Hashem forgot? He forgets nothing. Why do he need us to remind him? But Moshe, for that, we need to learn a separate mimer, and it's not for now. But I'm going to encourage you that you can go online, you will find in English that question and that answer. So I'm giving you homework to your question. Okay?
Go ahead.
Okay, let's go weiter. Mem Dalet. Ach, derech prat, eichu derech hayichud. The Alter Rebbe says, yes, I've laid the groundwork in the first chapter. Very nice. But could you give me some details? The Alter Rebbe is speaking like Moshe. Be practical. Umau inyan tshuva. What is this idea, this type of tshuva, this paradigm shift tshuva? Velama yoinisen dafke b'reish hashana bir hakosuv achakach lo b'chol bris. Velama dafke b'reish hashana. I'm sorry. And thirdly, the Alter Rebbe asks, why dafka on Rosh Hashanah? I mean, I gave you already pretty much the answer, but at the end of the last paragraph. But this is the three questions of the Alter Rebbe. How do we do it? Specify. Give me specifics. What's the concept of a paradigm shift tshuva of Rosh Hashanah? And why dafka on Rosh Hashanah? So he says, Bir HaKosev, he says, let's go further into Parshas Nitzavim. Remember, Yoni, there's a mimer on the pasuk in Nitzavim. So he says, let's look further in the verse. Achakach, it says in the pasuk, La'avrecha bebris, for you go by, you go through, you experience a covenant, a bris. To understand this mashal, what's the Torah using this concept of bris? Mashal, for example, shnei ohavim shekorsim bris b'neihem. Two good friends make an agreement, right? Like we all studied in high school. After 20 years, O. Henry's famous work, after 20 years, right? We're making an agreement. After 20 years, we are going to meet on this street corner in Baltimore where we grew up and we played ball. We are going to meet, even though we go out and we go in different ways and we're all over. But after 20 years, and this is this date, we are going to meet here because we are soulmates and buddies. They make an agreement, a bris, a covenant, that their love that they have when they're young should never cease. So even if they're going to marry wives that both are witches, excuse the expression, or the husbands are witches, and they say, stay away from that guy. You know, many times it's the spouse that gets in the way. You want to be a friend with someone, and he or she says, no, stay away. That's only here or here. But if you make a krisis bris, nothing can stop you. Nothing, because it goes deeper than even marriage, okay? Never forget that. As great as marriage is and as holy as it is, a krisis bris comes from the essence. And if two people, if they feel so one, nothing can stop them. Nothing, okay? Now, it doesn't mean you have to do it in a way where you upset a spouse, and you don't have to stick it into their face. But the krisis bris still is very palpable. I just met this friend I told you I hadn't seen in 46 years, and I asked my wife and kids. I introduced them. It was like we were back in yeshiva in first grade. We met in first grade through ninth grade, and I asked them. It was like we were talking to each other like we're children in cheder. The love, the old love that's so genuine is very, very, very strong. Especially if you make an agreement, a krisis bris, that we are going to keep this going. Let's continue the mashal. If their love would be such that they say we're going to have it forever, why do you need a bris? Why do you need to take, it says you cut a piece of meat and you walk in between, whatever. It's called a krisis bris. Why do you need it? Because they're fearful. Shema yivutol hadover ubatla avosei. Maybe the love that we had for each other, the concern, will be annulled. Or Shema yikra ezem nis b'mchutz. Here he's alluding to what I said. Maybe it's your spouse or something else that causes the love to wane. So therefore, they krisis habris ti avosem ava nitzchis, through the bris, it'll be an everlasting love. Bal timait, you won't be able to budget and to move from it. Olam vod forever. And no inner or outer obstacle will prevent the relationship. Because they make a very mighty and powerful bound connection. By making a connection of love that's a wondrous connection beyond rationale. Rationally, you shouldn't be there. Whether your spouse doesn't want you to be there, your employer, your situation, you can't get there, right? Like Mendel Futava said to me when I made that video of him, I really want to be by my sister in Australia, but I don't have the energy. I'm an old man. I don't have the money, so I'm coming to you. In other words, the kesher, and that's a sister, of course. Here we're not talking about just a family member. The kesher exists. People always ask, when I wrote about Rabbi Soloveitchik and the Rebbe, they say, well, what type of relationship they have, the way you're making it sound, if they barely met for 50 years, or 40 years they were in America. They met maybe 3, 4, 5 times. So as Telushkin writes in his book, and I wrote it in mine as well, that's not the sign of a connection. The sign is that the 1 or 2 times that you correspond or you meet, it's like you never left. Okay? So the Alter Rebbe says here that the kesher niflal is l'mayla mitam v'das. It's above logic. So you're right, logically, Hillel, if you don't write to each other, you don't call each other, you don't communicate, you're not really friends. Right? That's what you ask, that's what it'll tell you. But that's tam v'das. That's logic. L'mayla mitam v'das is, it goes beyond that logical equation. And therefore, although based on logic, there should have been a cessation of the love, or maybe even there's a reason to hate that person or not like him because of a certain reason, because of the covenant you make, their love it forces you to have that love. The krisis bris forces the love and the connection between the two. Very important. Moshe, this is so important. You're a gabbai in the shul. This likud is so important. You know it is. For all sin, love covers up. Now what's the idea? You see a problem. You see a situation. If you tap in to your real ava, you're beyond it. And there is a problem. And there is a situation. You have to find a way to deal with it. But you don't conclude with, I hate him, or, out you go, and all of that. No. This is your brother. This is your sister. That famous story, Who is the nut in the center of town performing, where everyone comes to look at this person who's mentally not well. And then there's one person standing there, and he's very sad and somber. They say, why aren't you laughing and giggling and enjoying? Look how he's performing like a weirdo and a fun, and all that. And he says, to me, it's not funny. That's my brother. Or that's my son. Think about that. Think about that, Rosh Hashanah. Anyway, that's the story. We'll continue tomorrow, Mr. Shem. Have a great day. Yes.
My birthday today.
Mazel Tov. You're 25 years old. Mazel Tov. Till 120, you're innocent. You have the attitude of a 25-year-old? That's what I meant. Ich habe Shnas Hatzlacha, Bracha, Gesund, Parnasa, Nachas from your children and grandchildren. Sei gesund. Hashem, take it. A good day. Good day.
Happy birthday,
Thank you. Happy birthday. Take care. Do me a favor.